Hi everyone, welcome back to Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. In today's video we're going to be talking about my top favourite reads of 2023. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name's Alice and I have way too many books, and I ended up reading 174 books last year, and 22 of those books I gave 5 stars to. So I have had to think quite carefully about this list, because back when I made my favourites of the year so far, in the middle of the year, I had conveniently only read 10 5-star books, so I was able to include all of them. Before we start, the top 10 absolute favourites of the year, I do want to just give some awards to some of my other 5-star books. So the first thing I've done with this list is I've not allowed myself to put any of my rereads on it, which was really hard because I had quite a few books that were 5-star rereads this year. So my award for the best reread is a joint award to be given to The Dark is Rising sequence by Susan Cooper. Obviously, these are 2 of my favourites from that series. Book 3, Green Witch, is probably my top favourite of all, and Silver on the Tree is the final book in the series. These were still absolutely some of my best reading times of the year, and I would definitely say my best favourite bookish moment of the year was meeting the absolute legend that is Susan Cooper and hearing her talk all about these wonderful books. So absolutely recommend these. These were my far and away favourite reread of the year, but I am going to give this award jointly to another book as well, because I also very much enjoyed my reread of Goodnight Mr. Tom by Michelle Magorian, and I did break this rule about rereads and allow this into the top 10 that I had in the middle of the year, but being as there were so many good books by this point of the year, I decided to be ruthless and not allow my rereads into my very top 10. But this book series and this book are absolutely wonderful reads, and they were even better exceptional rereads. Secondly, I wanted to give out a best poetry award, and one of these poetry books is sort of connected to one of the books in my top 10, and the other one isn't, so I'm going to award the Best Poetry Award, I think, to Jane Campbell's Please Do Not Touch This Exhibit. This was just so moving and made me feel so many different things. Don't really have the words to describe how this poetry affected me, so I think this was a wonderful read. I didn't read a huge amount of poetry in the past year, but I absolutely loved this, and I also absolutely loved Michael Rosen's The Advantages of Nearly Dying. Both of these meant a huge amount to me because they both involve hospital and things that have affected me in my life, but they both did it in extremely different ways. Both absolutely poetry collections that I really connected to. Best graphic novel of the year, and this was definitely a year where I was getting really into graphic novels, would be Heartstopper by Alice Oseman, Volume 5. I read this right at the end of the year. I do really like graphic novels, and I do think I will soon be making a video about graphic novels that I've enjoyed. And this one is not at all like the other graphic novels that I read, which I would say mostly fall under like fantasy, sci-fi, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and that sort of thing. Whereas this is obviously like a really cozy graphic novel. I absolutely love the art style in this, depicting Nick and Charlie and their friends, and I just thought this was another excellent entry in the Heartstopper series. Now, you may notice when I get into the list that there isn't really a thriller or crime book in the top 10, which is weird because I love thrillers, mystery and crime fiction. But my favourite thriller of the year that I gave 4.5 stars to, so missed out on this list, I would definitely say check out if you like thrillers that are almost verging on horror in like the suspense and sense of terror that they give you. Really excellent surprise that I came upon this year through the Killer Reads Thriller Month book club run by AJ Dunn over at AJ Dunn Reads and Writes is Night of the Hunter by Davis Grubb. I'd heartily recommend this, and if I see a copy of this, I am going to be adding it to my collection. That was probably my favourite thriller of the year. I think that all of the other genres that I read are represented in the top 10. And here we go. Let's get on with it. At number 10 on my top 10 books that I read in 2023 is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. A massive surprise because this is fantasy. In fact, it's out and out fantasy, I would say, with perhaps a dash of sci-fi, if sci-fi is in fact like apocalyptic books. I haven't read the rest of this trilogy yet, but this is the start of a trilogy, and it's set in a world where every so often they get a fifth season, and the fifth season is apocalyptic season kind of thing. I just thought that this was really fast-paced. I read this on holiday. I absolutely ate it up in every way. I loved the twists in this. I loved how it all came together at the end, and I cannot wait to read the rest of the trilogy. This was a recommendation originally from Gemma Books, and it was gifted to me by Charlie from Charlie Book Reads. As expected, it was a favourite. I love apocalyptic things, and this just did that in such a different way with like sort of earth magic. A great way into fantasy if you're not really a fantasy reader, I think, which I haven't considered myself until this year. But yes, there will be more fantasy on this list. Definitely going to pick up more N.K. Jemisin. In at number 9, we have a very, very sad book, which is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. I think I've said in a previous video that I've enjoyed everything I've read by Patrick Ness. I think he's a brilliant author. He wrote this from an original idea and first chapter by Siobhan Dowd, who tragically died of cancer, and this is a book that very much deals with that topic of like terminal cancer, and it follows a young boy called Connor who is struggling with the fact that his mother has cancer, but people are keeping things from Connor, and one night a monster calls and we go from there. This is just devastating. I probably cried multiple times in this book, I believe. It was just heartbreaking from start to finish, particularly the finish. I have lots of tissues ready if you're going to read this book, but I thought it was so compelling. I thought that the combination of like the monster and the fantastical with like the hard reality was really, really expertly done. An absolutely stunning book. In at number 8, we have some sci-fi, and a new author for this year who I really, really enjoyed. Both of her books that I got to was Becky Chambers, and the book I've picked out of the two that I read is To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. This is a novella, and it's very much sort of out and out sci-fi, this one. It's set in the future, and it follows like a group of explorers who are checking out various potentially habitable worlds. And I just love the way that this one was done and how Chambers writes this from a first person perspective and sort of in an almost diary-like way. I really liked the setup of this book. I really liked the execution of it. I don't want to say too much about it because it's a very short book at only 138 pages, so no spoilers here, but I thought that this was an excellent sci-fi book. I cannot wait to read the rest of the Wayfarers series. This is a standalone, it's not in the Wayfarers series, and I also can't wait to read the Monk and Robot series. So definitely lots of Becky Chambers on the cards for 2024, I hope. At number 7, we have the point at which I've decided to cheat and let 2 books be in this position because they're both by the same author. So the book I'm going to hold up to you is, I think, definitely my favourite of the 2. But 2 books from this author received 5 stars this year, and the best of them was Best Served Cold by Jo Abercrombie. The other book being the second book in the First Law trilogy, Before They Are Hanged. Those two are also probably jointly my second favourite audiobook of the year. I've been listening to this on audio. All of these books set in the First Law world by Joe Abercrombie. They are expertly narrated by Stephen Pacey, who gives brilliant voices to all of the various characters. I talked about this one in my December wrap-up, but this is a revenge tale following Monza Makato, who has something very bad happen to her in the first chapter, swears revenge, and we then follow her revenge across different places in this world and encompassing many different characters, most of whom I absolutely loved, or love to hate. And I think that Joe Abercrombie's characters are just my favourite characters that I come across in a given year. So I read the first book in the First Law trilogy last year, and I believe it was in my top 10 of the year. If it wasn't, then it very narrowly missed out, and I definitely appreciated a couple of the characters from that series even more than I appreciated the characters in this one. Obviously, Glocta, top villain probably of all time, and I just absolutely loved Fairy Mao Jin. I think she's brilliant. But anyway, Joe Abercrombie is deservedly in at number 7 on this list, and these are, again, fantasy, grimdark fantasy, very, very gory, very, very brutal books, but I absolutely love it. This has really been my way into fantasy, and I've been reading the whole lot of Joe Abercrombie's books with Gemma from Gemma Books and Jack from Spread Book Joy. So yeah, another really enjoyable fantasy, completely different to the other fantasy that I've talked about. In at number 6 is the first book I don't have to hold up, and that was the Booker Prize winner Prophet Song by Paul Lynch. I didn't rate this book any higher in my top 10 because it was just absolutely devastating, and it took me actually some time to recover from this book. I haven't bought myself a copy because I don't know whether I would be able to reread Prophet Song. On the one hand, I would want to because I think there was more to be gained from it even, but on the other hand, it was so devastating that I don't know if I could put myself through that again. But I really loved it. It's a book set in dystopian near future Ireland where they're living in a police state, and we follow a main character who most definitely does not make great decisions, and I think a lot of people have disliked the book on that basis. But I thought that following this woman and her family and their struggle, just the way that just terrible things continued to happen, I thought it was really masterfully written. It's very much not a writing style that I normally like, but I thought it worked perfectly here. I do have a full review video of this book, so do check that out if you want to know a lot more about it. I think I filmed it the day that I finished the book. But moving on to happier books, sort of. In at number 5, I have chosen The Secrets of Heartwood Hall by Katie Lumsden. Now, this book was always going to be special to me because I got to go to my very first book launch this year of this book, and Katie is a booktuber at the channel Books and Things, but it isn't just special because of that. This book was absolutely brilliant. I just was stunned by the fact that Katie is a debut author and that this is so accomplished, so well written, and I just loved the mysterious house in this. We follow Margaret Lennox in the Victorian era, and she's off to a new position as a governess in the mysterious Heartwood Hall. I loved the way things unfolded in this. I loved all the nods towards the Victorian literature that you can tell is very much loved by Katie, and it definitely put me in mind of things like The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I think this is like really a love letter to the Brontes, particularly those two books, but it's also like a really good book in its own right. I felt like this was a lot like reading a Victorian book, but without some of the difficulty of doing that. I absolutely raced through this book because I was desperate to know what was going on. It was so gripping, it was so full of plot, and I just thought it was absolutely excellent. Historical fiction is another genre that I seem to have been getting more into this year, particularly with this one, and not a genre that I've previously thought I was particularly a fan of. An absolutely brilliant read. If you haven't read this yet, I highly, highly recommend it. In at number 4, we have Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I read this one for the Booktube Prize originally, and I think that this is just a really good book. It's a book that I didn't love everything about, but I just knew that it was a 5-star read. This is a book that is about Sam and Sadie, who have been in each other's lives since childhood, and when they are at university, they start to make computer games together. I loved the sort of video games stuff in this. Even though I'm not a big gamer and I'm pretty bad at video games, I still got a lot of the references. My husband has played some of the games that were in here, which really did get me excited. So I loved that side of it. But the best thing about this book was the friendship of Sam and Sadie, and also their friend Mark's, and those three are really at the heart of this book. And I feel like this book really looks at different forms of love, not necessarily love, but the love that you have for people who you are friends with, you're close with, who you want in your life, even though they sometimes make your life difficult. I truly believed in the characters of Sam and Sadie. I sometimes wanted to grab hold of them and shake them and tell them to just talk to each other because I found them infuriating. But for a book to inspire that level of feeling in me, it has to be a really, really good book. And I absolutely adored Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I would definitely reread this one in the future. In at number 3, we have my best non-fiction of the year and also my best audiobook of the year, which was Getting Better by Michael Rosen. And I absolutely adore Michael Rosen. If you have seen my December wrap-up, or you've seen the video where I wrapped this one up, I think probably back in the summer sometime, I just think he is an amazing man, a wonderful poet, and I thought that this book was so moving. It's a book where Rosen looks at lots of various things in his life and his family's life, and how he has helped himself get mentally better from some of these traumas and things that have gone on in his life. This was a book that reduced me to tears on multiple occasions. It's so desperately sad when Rosen talks so brutally honestly about the event of his son's Eddie's death, age 18, I believe, from like meningitis, septicemia. He was narrating this audiobook as well. I felt like I was hearing a friend talk to me about this, and it was devastating. And Rosen also in this book just connected with me on a different level about the feelings that you might have after being in hospital for a long time. Michael Rosen was in a coma for 40 days in the COVID pandemic. Obviously that isn't something that's happened to me, but I have experienced being in hospital, and his feelings getting better and while recovering and when trying to come to terms with all the things that have happened to him are just the closest I have ever heard in writing to feelings that I myself have had. So this was a book with a really, really strong connection to me. I didn't separate my fiction and non-fiction because I read so much less non-fiction, but this was by far and away the best non-fiction I read of the year. A really, really helpful book. It was the personal connection that has driven this to the very top of my list. So I have 2 more fiction books to talk about, the top 2. One of the books has been my top favourite of the year since approximately March, and I didn't think there was any chance anything could dislodge it from its perch. And the other came along in September time for the FOMO book club, and there is no doubt in my mind that this is now a favourite book of all time, but I have still not been able to shift that book from March from the top spot. So in at number 2, very narrowly, we have The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. Another book like The Secrets of Heartwood Hall with a mysterious house, a mysterious background. And this one follows Margaret, and she has gone to speak to an author called Vida Winter, who is a very famous author who has never revealed anything about her past. In The 13th Tale, she intends to tell Margaret the truth about her background and what has happened to her in childhood. And we sort of go between these brilliant scenes of Margaret and Vida talking in the present day and these scenes from the past. There's also a lot of other stuff going on here. I would hate to spoil any aspect of this book for anyone because it has so many layers and is so mysterious. I just thought this was an absolutely brilliant, gripping read from Diane Setterfield. I could not put it down. It's definitely a book that I believe will stand the test of time and be a favourite of all time. I haven't been able to forget this book at all. I thought it was so well done. Yes, my second favourite book of the year by a very narrow margin. If you've been watching my channel at all this year, you will know what book I'm about to talk about, and it's stood on the shelves behind me all year. It's been an absolute favourite in the same way that Cloud Cuckoo Land was last year. I read it for the Women's Prize originally. I fell in love with it. So this is, of course, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. I just thought that this book was head and shoulders above everything else that I read this year, apart from The 13th Tale. It was just a book with so many things about it that I think are absolute genius on the part of the author. I don't think there's going to be any of you out there who don't already know a bit about Demon Copperhead, but very, very quickly it follows protagonist Damon, who is the Demon Copperhead of the title, and it follows him in much the same way that we follow David in David Copperfield, because this is a retelling of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, but it is set in the Appalachian Mountains. It is largely about the opioid crisis in America. I actually ended up reading 2 Barbara Kingsolver books this year, and I did give the other one 5 stars as well, which was The Poisonwood Bible. But much as I loved The Poisonwood Bible and thought that there was definitely elements of genius of Kingsolver in that, I just felt that this was another level. The main thing within this book that gives me that amazement factor is the voice. I absolutely loved the narrative voice of this, told by Demon, and I just thought that it was so well done, and I don't know how Barbara Kingsolver had it in her to so perfectly invoke this voice of this boy from like his birth to his teenage years. I just thought it was so clever, so well done. I loved the way it drew on David Copperfield, which is another book that I love, and I just thought this was absolutely brilliant. You've heard me go on about this all year long, so you don't need any more of that. If you want to know more about my feelings on this, I did review this along with 3 other Women's Prize books in a video back in March or April, and I'll link that in the description down below. Definite favourite of the year. There are so many different things in this that I could just talk and talk and talk about. There's so much to unpack. Those were my top 10 books of the year and some of my other favourites that didn't quite make it into the top 10. So I do hope you've enjoyed this video today. I have enjoyed gushing about these books again. Several of these definitely have potential to be reread in future, to be absolute top favourites with me forever. Another brilliant year of reading. Do let me know in the comments, what were your top books of the year? Give me your top 10 if you like. If you've made a best books that you read in 2023 video, I would love to see that as well. Feel free to tell me that you've made such a video so that I can go and check it out. The only problem with these videos is that I get more ideas to put on my TBR. But that can't be helped. That's part of the fun of Booktube. If you read any of them and loved them too, let me know. If you read them and didn't love them, let me know. I'd love to chat to you in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed this today, please do give it a like and please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. I'm very much looking forward to another year of reading and finding new favourites. That's all from me today, and I hope very much to see you all again very soon for another video all about books here on Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Bye for now.